Now with the third gem in their possession, Jacob and his friends are making progress against the Dark Lord. Time is running out, though. As more is sacrificed for the cause, and the Centralia troops battle against the Southerners without their lead general, Centralia is in trouble. The Dark Lord has put his pawns into play, and it is only a matter of time before he has control of the land. Jacob and Matt must use the help of friends to complete their quest and destroy the Dark Lord once and for all.
I don't like this series anymore. I just found out that General Poi is in prison. Oh, fiddlesticks. I bet this book is good, though. I'll read it next week. Bill Clinton.
I don't see why the Great Wizards don't even help. It is a pretty good book, though. You should totally buy my next album. If you don't, I might go all day on you.
Taylor Swift. Part 8. Chapter 1. This is so cool! Exclaimed Matt as the Great Wizard flew them across the desert landscape. Where are you taking us? Asked Jacob.
We're going to find a place where I can land. You two shouldn't be this heavy. You are skinnier than a farmer's old dog who hasn't eaten for a month, exclaimed the Great Wizard.
That was a terrible analogy, said Matt.
You know I could drop you right now. I feel like 9,000 feet of rapid descent would do you some good, exclaimed the Great Wizard fiercely.
When they finally landed, the sun was starting to set across the vast Sorafon Valley ahead of them. To the south, Jacob spotted a tall rocky peak, almost completely bare of vegetation. He only noticed it because of its great height compared to the rest of the landscape. As he looked toward the top, though, he saw 5 objects soar over the tall, mighty peak.
"Sir, look!"
exclaimed Jacob in terror.
"Oh, no, they're here!" said the Great Wizard under his breath.
Matt moved forward. "Let me handle this! I have skills! I can take these dragons easily!" Dragons, thought Jacob. What is he talking about? All he saw were small objects in the distance. Suddenly he saw a small ray of fire come from one, which fell apart as it neared the ground. Matt was right, but how did he know so quickly?
"You two run for cover! Matt, you won't stand a chance!" exclaimed the Great Wizard as Matt shot some practice blasts at a sagebrush, catching it on fire. As the two of them ran for cover behind some large boulders behind them, the Great Wizard shot a blast of blue magic that became water just before hitting the fire, extinguishing it. When they reached some rocks, the two of them ran behind it and put their backs to it. "Matt, how did you know those were dragons?" asked Jacob. "I don't know. I guess I just felt they were, like we're brothers from another mother or something," exclaimed Matt. "That doesn't make any sense," yelled Jacob. Jacob and Matt peeked their heads over the big rocks as they heard the dragons approaching. They saw the Great Wizard swinging his staff in a slicing motion, casting a blue ring radiating from him. The two of them ducked as the boulder next to him sliced clean in half, the top flying 10 feet away. Still on the ground, Jacob looked at Matt, who was freaking out. "He could have killed us just now! What was he thinking? I may have never seen Melissa again because of him!" exclaimed Matt. Sand and dirt swirled around, blocking Jacob's vision of the battle ahead. Only light from fire blasts and the sound of nearby dragons could be visible and heard through the chasm of sand. Suddenly, Jacob fell to the ground as a blast from a dragon flew over his head. "Jacob, let's get out of here!" yelled Matt over the sound of the battle ahead as another fire blast hit the ground about 20 feet away, sending up smoke and sand. "Okay, let's go!" agreed Jacob. The two jumped up and ran the opposite direction of the brawl. As they ran, coughing in the dust and sand started to clear, and they finally saw ahead of them. To the north lay a large sand dune that they began to run up until they heard a sound behind them. Turning around, they met the look of one of the dragons, and on top a black knight. Shooting fire out of its nostrils, the dragon charged at the two. Jacob and Matt ran in opposite directions along the sand dune. Suddenly, Jacob was thrown off his feet as a blast of fire hit the ground below him. Jacob soared into a cactus, burned and in pain as the sharp needle stabbed into his skin. Jacob then had a vision. It was of him playing dead, as the dragon and its rider lost interest and flew away. When he awoke, he held still, pretending to play dead, as the needles dug deeper into his face and arms. When awake, Jacob got up and fell to the ground in pain. Chapter 2. Jacob looked up to see another dragon come flying by. He then spotted Matt shooting fire blasts at an attacking dragon. The fire did no harm to the dragons as it bounced off his red hard scales. Jacob had another vision. This was of him eating the sand in front of him. This vision was short, and when awake, Jacob didn't hesitate to follow the vision, though not having any idea of how it would help. After swallowing a mouthful of sand, Jacob started to throw up. The approaching dragon shot a fire blast at Jacob, hitting the ground to the right of him, but burning his hair and right arm as it bounced off the sand in his direction. Now in even more pain and still vomiting, Jacob rolled over, rolling down the sandy dune. At the bottom, thirsty and in pain, Jacob saw the great wizard land on top of the dune and take out a dragon with a blast of blue magic. Jacob saw nothing more as he passed out. Melissa had been in Centralia City for almost a week now. It was nothing like it had been only a couple months ago, last time she had been there. Now, instead of people talking about royalty and other small ordeals, the large city was in complete panic. The anti-Dark Rebellion headquarters was still in a ruin down in Jacobson, and Southerners were approaching quickly, conquering cities as they went. They had taken small farm towns mostly along their way, such as Cornstalk, Solcow, Boundary, Maverick, and North Maverick, but were now on the south shore of Lake Minavon. Now closing in on the capital, thousands of people from the plain and from the capital area have been evacuating even further north. Melissa was to leave the king and queen as well, up to Alta Schools. Melissa had been through a lot in the last few weeks. After experiencing dangers down south and almost being killed when her carriage was attacked, Melissa wanted to get away from the Southerners as quickly as possible. She thought back on her ride with Lone and Barbara 2 weeks prior. They had left the farmhouse behind and had just lost view of the soldiers when Melissa realized she would need a way to get to Centralia City. She had told the old couple she was a citizen from Finegrass and had gotten lost on a camping trip. She had hid her identity as the Princess of Centralia in fear of those two knowing how important she was. Should she tell the truth now? Wondered Melissa to herself. It would be risky if they found out. They could turn her in to the enemy. She decided to ditch them at Finegrass and maybe find someone else to take her to Centralia City. After 2 boring days of rolling along next to giant fields, the road started to climb up slightly, and ahead lay a tall knoll. Melissa knew that behind was Finegrass. When they reached the top, Melissa got a stunning view of Finegrass and the tall central mountains rising up in the distance. As they started down the hill, Melissa thought about how she would leave them. She decided to pretend her home was ahead, thanked them, and they would be on their way. When they reached town, Melissa led them through the main road with people, donkeys, and carts scrambling along as people were prepared to make the journey north. Markets had lines at the door as people loaded their carts with food and other supplies. Eventually, they left the hustle behind as they came into a neighborhood lined with small cottages. As the road came to a bend through some oaks and pines, Melissa pointed out a cottage to the left.
That's my house. You can drop me off here. Thank you,
cried Melissa as the cart came to a stop.
Why? How about we meet your folks, miss?
Said Barbara.
Oh, I don't think that's a very good idea. You two need to get going to Corbin,
exclaimed Melissa. If they found out she had no idea who lived in this home, they would know she had lied to them. Oh, miss, we aren't in any hurry, I'll dare say. We'll have to find an inn here anyway. Come on, let's go meet your folks, finalized Lone. The 3 of them walked towards the door as Melissa's mind raced on what to do. After Lone knocked, the door opened with a young man opened the door with his wife close behind. Melissa got desperate, trying not to reveal her lie to such a nice old couple as Lone and Barbara.
Hi, Dad,
stammered Melissa.
I don't know you,
asked the man. Then his wife peeked over his shoulder.
What, Dawn? That is the princess!
exclaimed his wife. Lone turned to Melissa. What in the haystack is she talking about? Melissa made a break for it. She couldn't get far, though. After making it about halfway to the curve in the road, Melissa tripped under her heels, sending her sprawling to the ground. Bruised but otherwise fine, Melissa ran down the dirt road towards the town. Chapter 3. When Jacob awoke, the sun had gone down, and he was lying down where he was last at, with Matt and the Great Wizard sitting a couple feet away next to the fire. Matt turned as he heard Jacob stir. Dude, you failed! I told you my ability was way better, mocked Matt. Matt, his ability is very important and special, not to be made fun of. Besides, your fire blast didn't do anything to those dragons either, scolded the Great Wizard. Matt is right, my ability is lame. I had a vision that I needed to eat some sand. When I did, all it made me do was vomit, exclaimed Jacob. Yep, I told you his ability is totally weak sauce, said Matt. Jacob, I used the last of my energy to heal you. You will be able to travel tomorrow. For now, you two get some rest, said the Great Wizard. The next day, they cleaned up and prepared to leave. Jacob kept on thinking about how useless his power was, or ability. Either way, it was lame. It only helped him sometimes, and sometimes it left him vomiting in the sand. They then started out on foot. The great wizard had no more potion or Ceylonian juice to power most of his abilities. Now he had barely any magic until he could receive some of the substance. 2 days later, they reached the city of VIII. They needed to get supplies there, so they made their way into town exhausted. The great wizard had explained that if discovered their true identity, they would be destroyed. They were still in Yemen, enemy territory. "Hey, great wizard! I don't like you calling you that. It's annoying. What is your real name?" asked Matt. "You can call me Sir or Great Wizard. It is disrespectful to call me by my name," explained the Great Wizard. "Yeah, I'm just gonna make a name for you then, sir. How about Bob?" asked Matt. "No," answered the Great Wizard. "Ha, too bad. Bob is a great name. Suits you very well," said Matt. Finale was a big city with most buildings made of sandstone blocks. There was hardly any resources available in the vast desert, so most things had to be shipped up from up north. The three of them came to a well, and after paying a coin, were given a bucket of water from a woman on duty there. After filling their canteens, they drank the remaining water and walked over to the market. Standing there was a man with a mustache and tan skin.
Hello! Welcome here today! What would you like to buy?
Asked the man in a heavy accent. 3 loaves of bread, 5 apples, and 3 bananas, answered Bob.
Oh, yummy! Bananas are my most favorite of them all!
Exclaimed the man. After exchanging the money for food, they walked over to an inn down the street. After paying, they started up the steps into the room when the lady at the desk stopped them.
Who are these fine young men?
Asked the lady in the same accent as the man at the market. "These are my grandkids, Bill and William," lied Bob.
Ah, I am currently single. I am only around a decade older than them. Maybe one of them could take me to wife,
exclaimed the lady. "Sorry, these 2 are not open for marriage," said Bob quickly as they walked up the stairs into their room. The next day they went to a ranch just outside town and bought 3 horses. That afternoon they set off again into the vast Yemen desert. A few days later they passed by the large and barren Sun Mountains. As they climbed up a bare slope, sagebrush and saguaros below them, Jacob had a vision. It was of the 3 of them coming to a stop at the summit of the peak they were currently on, and deciding which way to go from there. Jacob had a feeling to go around the gully ahead of them and make the long loop around. After Jacob awoke, he shared his vision with Bob and Matt. "We will make the long loop then," agreed Bob. "Bob, I need more water," complained Matt. "Would you stop calling me that already? I told you, call me sir. Is that clear?" snapped Bob. "Oh, yes, sir. Sorry, sir," said Matt sarcastically. As they reached the summit, about 3,000 feet above the ground, they turned to the right and made the loop around the gully. Suddenly Jacob heard the hooves below. Looking down, they saw a platoon of Southern soldiers on horses and stopped to set up camp. The 3 of them hurried along quietly along the ridge until Bob suddenly stopped. He got off his horse and walked behind a tall shrub. He moved to the side and then shot a blast of magic at the camp, causing an explosion and setting fire to most of the tents. Bob, Jacob, and Matt hopped back on their horses and galloped away from the angry voices behind. Sir, why'd you do that? Now they know we're out here!" exclaimed Jacob. "I'm sorry, that was a big mistake. I just couldn't resist. They were all just right there and I felt like I needed to blow something up. This is what happens when you lose your magic for even just a couple of days. Being a wizard can be a big burden," explained Bob. The next day they left the Sun Mountains behind and now in Horman started towards the big bay along the coast, which they believed the White Gem was located. Chapter 4. Melissa finally reached the town. She walked through crowds of people trying to find an officer. Finally she found one.
Sir, officer, sir, I am Princess Melissa. I need you to take me to Centralia City,
exclaimed Melissa. The officer studied her for a bit. "Oh my, you are Princess Melissa!" exclaimed the officer.
"Yeah, that is what I just said,"
cried Melissa, irritated.
"Can you take me to the palace, please?"
asked Melissa. "Oh, of course, my lady, right away!" exclaimed the officer as they walked over to his horse. Once next to it, the officer offered to help her on, which she rudely refused. Once on, they started off to Centralia City. At the palace, Melissa and the officer were treated warmly. The officer was promoted and Melissa was given a great feast in her honor. The king had sent a massive search party out when her carriage did not arrive. 2 weeks later, Melissa and the king and queen made their way, escorted by 200 guards, to Alta Schools. Chapter 5.
It had been at least a couple of weeks since Jacob, Matt, and Bob had had their encounter with Southern soldiers. They had spent hot, tiring days traveling across the barren desert. Any moisture they could find, they took. Matt's horse died of dehydration about 20 crocks past the town of Brush. He now had a ride with Jacob. It had only rained once so far, and now they approached the town of Lancaster to get more food and water. "Bob!" The great wizard had given up correcting him. "When will we be there?" asked Matt.
"In just about half an hour, actually. Why do you ask?" answered Bob.
"I'm tired. I want to eat, drink, and sleep," exclaimed Matt. "Oh no, Matt, I just had a vision. You shouldn't drink until we reach Palm Bay or you will die," said Jacob untruthfully. "What? Shoot, I don't want to die. I'm too young," exclaimed Matt with tears in his eyes. "If I die, I won't be able to marry Melissa." "I'm just kidding, Matt. I haven't had any visions since we're in the Sun Mountains," explained Jacob. The next day they got water and slept in an inn. Lancaster was much the same as the other towns they had passed through. Dusty streets and brick buildings were found in the town. A couple days later, they reached the city of Sage. The only difference it had with Lancaster was that it was bigger and had the tall Horman Highlands lining the skyline behind the buildings. After sleeping, they started out up the tall highlands. As they reached the top of the hill, they started back down towards a massive canyon ahead. They galloped along a winding creek as they entered the canyon. "Bob, where exactly will the White Gem be?" asked Jacob.
"I think it is about 30 crocks north of Palm Bay, somewhere near the cliffs," informed Bob. The next day they left the rocky canyon out into the Sacramento Valley, right next to the seashore. On the other side of the mountains, it was humid and a bit more wet. Jacob noticed something. He had spent his whole life living in or near the country of Horman. Up there, though, there was hardly any nationalism, and you could hardly tell the difference between the two sides of the river. Here, though, everything was different. The land, the people, the cities. Jacob wouldn't have recognized it was Horman if he wasn't aware of where they had been traveling. That night, they camped next to the Shillen Parade Lake, next to some willow trees. Jacob woke up in the middle of the night and decided to take a walk. He walked to the bank of the lake and then had a vision. It was of him on a boat similar to the Susie Lake, but smaller. He noticed he was on the ocean, heading west. Then he awoke. Jacob didn't understand why it mattered, but recognized he shouldn't ignore it. The next morning, he told them about his vision, which they didn't think much of. Then they headed towards Palm Bay. That night, they arrived at this town of Shillen, next to High Bay. Jacob could smell the salt air that he loved. It was so nice to be near the sea again. The next morning, they rode alongside other travelers along the bayside, heading to Palm Bay. With palm trees at the shore, Jacob saw the bright sunshine of the bright blue water as small waves came to a stop at the beach. Jacob loved the sea. He had lived next to it his whole life. It was crazy to think that only about 6 months ago, Jacob was being yelled at from the skipper. They reached Palm Bay later that day. Palm Bay was a big city with neat trees and nice homes and stores covering the shorefront. That night in their inn, Jacob experienced a surprise beyond measure. Chapter 5. "We'll be going east tomorrow. There's a place that I think Jacob can directly connect to his abilities and maybe show us where the White Gem is clearly," explained Bob.
"Bob, I don't like your face," said Matt rudely. "Why would you say that?" asked Jacob. Matt wasn't awake to answer, though. He had said it in his sleep. After waking Matt, they heard a knock on the door, and in walked Princess Jessica of Centralia. "Jessica! Jessica! You're alive! Jessica!" exclaimed Matt. He sprinted across the room and embraced Jessica and kissed her at least 20 times.
"Get off me, you sicko!"
exclaimed Jessica. "Wow, much like your sister, I see. I don't mind," said Matt as he went in for another embrace. Officers tackled Matt before he could, though.
"Thank you, that was really annoying. Jacob, I haven't seen you in such a long time,"
cried Jessica. "Jessica, I thought you were dead," exclaimed Jacob.
"Everyone did. I was actually teleported to the Dark Lord's fortress
Jessica shuddered.
and had to use my abilities to escape. I heard you and Matt both have abilities now, too."
exclaimed Jessica. "I can breathe fire! Jacob is totally lame. All he can do is see weird visions that make him eat sand and throw up," cried Matt from under an officer.
"Well, Princess, it seems as though you are all very good friends. After spending a few weeks with these two, I can come to believe that these two are unbelievably annoying. I don't know how you put up with them," said Bob, shaking his head. After Matt and Jacob told Jessica about what had happened since she had apparently died, with Matt crying a couple of times when Jacob told her about how he had talked of her nonstop and even switched his affections to her twin sister, Jacob told him about what had happened to her.
"After Apprentice Haven teleported me to his fortress, I found myself in an empty cell. I was interrogated every day. and had to eat nasty cold beans and brown water for my meals. Eventually, I discovered that I have an ability to manipulate people's minds. I can read and control their mind unless they have magic. I learned how to do it good enough, and I got the guard outside my cell to unlock me, give me a horse and weapons, and sent me off without anyone seeing. I had to use it on lots of people in order to get here.
Explained Jessica. The next day after breakfast, they all set off to the highlands. After a couple of hours, they found themselves on top of a forested mountain.
Chosen ones, we are nearing the spot. When we arrive, Jacob will need to go alone, explained Bob.
Finally, late in the afternoon, they reached a grove of aspens high in the mountains. They all waited while Jacob went to the other side. On the other side was an edge of a cliff. To the right was a tall waterfall, coming down up from about 10 feet above him and going down to the ground. Jacob closed his eyes, and he had had a vision, a very strong and clear one. This time, he was on a high snow-capped mountain with granite boulders dotting the summit. In front of him was a stone circle, and carved into it were the spots for all the gems. When looking down, Jacob noticed he had all the gems. As he placed them in a separate spot, he heard a voice behind him. Behind him was the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord looked about 7 feet tall, with black stone armor and an iron helmet that covered everything but his face. His mouth had jagged, sharp teeth and had bright red eyes. Jacob quickly put the last gem in, the blue gem, in hopes of destroying him, but the Dark Lord just laughed, a dark, evil laugh.
Ha 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 ha! You think those will stop me? You have been fooled! These gems won't do anything!
Cried out the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord shot a blast of red magic at Jacob, setting him flying off the tall peak. Jacob awoke, sweating. The gems, the quest, it was all for nothing. The Dark Lord was right. He had been fooled. All of a sudden, Jacob turned to see a blast of magic soar into the sky, and looking up, saw dragons. Bursting through the trees were Jessica and Matt.
They found us! The Great Wizard is trying to fight off the dragons, but there are wolves coming too. We have to get out of here,
cried Jessica. Just then a pack of giant black wolves charged the trees of the 3 chosen ones. One wolf jumped on Jessica, biting her in the arm.
Help!
Cried Jessica. Matt ran towards her, but too late. Another one came flying in, knocking Jessica off the edge. Matt dove and caught her hand. Hold on, Jessica! Cried Matt. One black wolf charged at Jacob, barely missing his leg. Another charged at Jacob from behind, yanking him down with his teeth. Ah, Matt! Fire blast them! Jacob called out. Matt turned, but too late, as one dove at him, and then dragged him the opposite way as Jessica. Jessica finally lost her grasp. No, Jessica! Cried Matt. Not again, Jessica, no! Sobbed Matt. Jessica had fallen. The quest had fallen. What would they do? To be continued.